Hello and welcome back to the top cards of 2017. In this last episode, I have my top 5 structures from the year, and I would have liked to have done 10, but there's not enough structures being used in Faeria right now to cover 10, so I've decided to go with 5, and these are structures that have influenced archetypes or influenced the metagame as a whole during 2017. So let's take a look at my top 5 structures. At number 5, we have Ruining Shrine, a zero-cost green structure that has a gift of giving to Faeria, and when it dies, it gives your opponent to Faeria as well. This is a great card for rush decks. It allows you to gain a burst of Faeria at no real cost, and you can use that Faeria then to play more creatures, instead of having to rely on collecting from the wells. If you remember my events, top 10 events, I remember Khalim's Prayer, very similar in effect. Khalim's Prayer is obviously a lot better, but you know, you get that Faeria burst without having to rely on collecting on those wells, and you can apply more pressure. Now, I did actually use this card during the early days of Crackthorn Beast as a way to burst Faeria, until later on it was either cut or players actually switched over to Feed the Forest when it cost free forest. So, although Ruining Shrine is not the most powerful of structures, in the right deck it can give you that burst of Faeria you need to continue applying pressure. At number 4, we have Windgate, a 1-cost desert structure that you can summon creatures adjacent to the structure, and if you activate the Windgate, it can move itself. This is featured in quite a few Yellow Rush builds throughout the year, and it's actually quite powerful in the right situation because it can help against landlocking. It can also allow you to move your creatures around the structure and protecting them from defenders. That's one of the most common uses for this, is you play the Windgate, you move it in between, say, a defender, and then you summon like a monk and you start hitting, so they have to kill the Windgate first before they can get to your creatures. It's a good way to collect off the wells as well. If you haven't set up that aggressive desert and say your opponent has taken the well spots, you can move your Windgate to close to a well spot, summon your haste creatures on the wells, and they start collecting and then start pushing damage. So it's a great card to maneuver around your opponent's defenses and lands, and although we don't see it much at the moment, this card just keeps coming back to Yellow Rush when they want to move around obstacles that the opponents have set up as defenses. So even though, like I said, we're not seeing it much in Yellow Rush right now, I still think it's a very, very strong structure. At number 3, we have the Imperial Drain, a zero-cost structure that empties the Faeria wells and then takes damage every turn, so it doesn't stick around forever and lock out those Faeria wells. Now, this is featured in a lot of rush decks, mainly red, but we've seen it pop up in yellow and green in the past. And as of recent, Red Rush has made its return thanks to Mr. T in the Monthly Cup. And Imperial Drain is just a fantastic card for aggro strategies because you don't rely on collecting off the wells. Your opponent needs to gather that Faeria in order to set up their defenses. So being able to lock out those Faeria wells is very powerful. And Red actually has a really good job of gaining Faeria outside of the wells using the combat mechanic. Commonly we see the Queen's Guard and we see the Underground Brigand feature it in red decks now as a way to gain Faeria without collecting off the wells once they've been locked out by the Imperial Drain. Now, Yellow Rush can use this card as well. They do have access to Khalim's Prayer and more recently the Lord of the Waste to gain additional Faeria, and maybe we'll see it crop up in Yellow Rush in the future. But Imperial Drain, if you're looking for a very solid structure to help your aggressive strategy, look no further. Locking out your opponent's wells is a valuable strategy when you're trying to stop them from defending against your pressure. At number 2, we have the Forbidden Library. This card has had a lot of influence on the metagame during the mid-year of Faeria in 2017. We had this card featuring in Blue Jump when it cost less lakes. And it's a very powerful card in the right deck. We can get this card going. Very, very strong. Production, draw a card, gain 2 Faeria and deal 2 damage to yourself. Now, the damage to yourself is usually irrelevant because the gain you the gain you get from the production ability is kind of nuts. You get to draw an additional card, so you get to draw 2 cards per turn, and you gain additional Faeria, so you gain 5 Faeria per turn in total. And this card did get nerfed because of its power level, because a lot of the blue jump players are starting to slam down libraries, use the water elementals to accelerate their lands, and gain such a massive advantage in card draw and economy. And we did see the Emperor's Command get imprinted, and that being an answer to that, but later on Forbidden Library did get nerfed again. Now we've also seen this card feature in Dreamweaver decks, because you're going to build 7 lakes anyway, so building towards the library is also very good. But another deck that has been utilizing this in recent times is the blue-green ramp decks. Using this card alongside Feed the Forest when it only costs 3 forests for massive accelerations of Faeria and card draw to make sure you can get those Sky Whales down quick and start winning the game. But blue-green ramp is a control deck, or a hard ramp deck, and it should be a little slower, and the combination of Forbidden Library and the old Feed the Forest accelerated a little too quick, so we saw Feed the Forest also get checked. And we're starting to see these big economy cards having land cost increases, because these big economy cards in the early game are really hard to deal with if you don't have the right answers. But Forbidden Library goes at number 2. I did want to put this card at number 1, but I'm pretty sure you guys will agree with what card I have coming up in the number 1 spot of my structure picks. Last but not least, at number 1, we have the Crystal Flower. The Swallow mechanic makes its return to the top spot. A 4-cost structure with a gift. Swallow a creature at the end of the turn, deal 1 damage to the structure. Now, before this card was changed, it used to deal 1 damage at the start of your turn, so you essentially got an extra turn than you already have now from its current text, and only cost 3 Faeria back in the day as well. So this card was basically a soft removal answer for every deck. Even Yellow Rush was running this. They were running the air elementals so they could accelerate their lands to 4 and use Crystal Flower to swallow any defenders that came down. Now Crystal Flower still gets a little bit of use, but not as much as it used to. This card, along with the Skywhale, helped define the metagame during the Oversky expansion, and they were refined because the Swallow mechanic was an interesting one to kind of balance, because it didn't kill the creature, but it usually put them out of play for long enough that the player who used the Swallow mechanic could win the game. But now the Sky Whale has been changed, so it's a little less durable, and the Crystal Flower a little bit more expensive, and again a little bit more durable, with that change to the 1 damage being dealt to the structure at the end of the turn rather than the start of your own turn. So yeah, Crystal Flower, still a very strong removal option. Like I said, not seen as much play as it used to, but I still feel that if you're looking for a universal soft removal answer, Crystal Flower is great if you're willing to build up to those 4 special lands. Now, will we see Crystal Flower in the future? I'm not sure. We'll have to see what other removal options are printed in future Faeria expansions. But as for structures, I hope structures do gain a bit more power going into the future, and we can start seeing structures having more influence in the game. That concludes the final episode of the top cards of 2017. Just went over my top 5 structures, but I've also covered my top 10 creatures and my top 10 events as well, so be sure to check them out on this channel. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up if you haven't already. Drop a subscribe to keep up to date of when our content goes live. So until next time, guys, take care and enjoy my top cards of 2017.